Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Chance, and today I'm going to be reviewing Xenon Profiteer. Now I know, don't judge this game by its name or, well, its box. It may sound super boring, but don't worry, I think this game is amazing. I think this is a bit of an overlooked deck builder out there in the world, and I think it's worth checking out. So let's get into this, and I'm going to start things off with just a quick review. So as I've mentioned, this is a deck builder. You're going to have this little central console card, which it's like your factory, but also acts as your player aid. Now you're also going to have your starter deck, and at the beginning of the game, you're just going to draw your hand of 5 cards. Pretty standard deck builder fare. And then you are going to take your turn. So on your turn, you're just going to follow your player aid. You are going to start with the distill action. So this is where the game kind of turns deck builder on its head. It turns it into, this is a deck shedding game, really. It's really leans into the deck management aspect of a deck builder game. And so we're going to do a distill, and you're going to be able to distill all cards of one element. Basically the easiest element to remove. So it's going to go down. It's going to say, do you have any nitrogen in your hand? If you have nitrogen in your hand, you're going to distill all nitrogen in your hand. So I have started with 1, so I would distill my 1 nitrogen. Distilling means that card gets removed from my deck, and then I'm done with my distill action. But let's say I had no nitrogen, then I would move on to oxygen. I would say, do I have any oxygen in my hand? I would distill the oxygen instead. If I had no oxygen in my hand, I'd move on to krypton, and so on. And essentially, you were trying to get your hand down to just xenon. So basically, if you only have xenon gases plus whatever, so we got some upgrade cards we'll talk about in a second here, but if you manage to get only xenon cards, you actually get to throw those xenon into storage, because that is your goal as Xenon Profiteer. You are trying to distill that xenon to fill contracts. So that's going to be the first action here, is the distill. Now on the second action, you either get to add air or wipe. Now I will mention the wipe action. It's never the most exciting one in the game, but sometimes you don't want to add air to your deck, because essentially adding air is taking 1 of each element card off to the side here. So we got a nitrogen, oxygen, krypton, and xenon, and we will throw that into our discard pile here that'll work its way back into the deck. So you can see that adding air is the way to get those xenon cards into your deck, but you're also adding in those other more plentiful elements in the atmosphere that you're going to have to distill first before you can get down to that xenon. So that's kind of the crux of the game, is getting that air into your deck, adding that little bit of xenon, and then distilling out those other elements to reduce down to just a hand of xenon. Now, when you also get air, you also just gain some money. I don't know what the thematic tie-in for that is, but you're going to gain 2 money for each air packet that you add. Now, if you didn't add air, you have the option to wipe, and this is usually the action that you take if, let's say, the market gets a little clogged up. That can help you out with getting the card that you want, maybe, but usually people will take this action if they don't want to add air. Maybe the deck is getting a little too thick, you're not distilling enough your xenon, and you really just need to not add air to your deck, so you're going to take that wipe action. Just wipe one of these market rows. Rule on the wipe is, as long as there's no tokens on those cards, and we'll come back to those tokens in a second here, you can wipe that card. So, okay, now we're done with that second step. Now you move on to the third one, and now you're down to buy or bid. So buying is kind of the primary action of this, kind of like air is the primary action of that second step. So buy is the primary action here. When you buy, you can buy from either of the market rows here. We got the top market row, which is mostly contracts. Contracts are going to be these cards here that are going to give you a certain amount of xenon that you need to fulfill it. Basically, to buy a contract, you don't have to pay any money. You just add that to your console. You can see this little pink bubble lines up here, and essentially there's no bubble on the other side, so you can only have 1 contract at a time. I actually really like this user interface design. It works out great. But now this is saying that I need to have 4 xenon to be able to fulfill this contract. So as I mentioned, over the course of the game, we're going to be storing xenon off to the side. Note, I just cheated. I just took it from the discard. I did not distill this properly. But essentially, we're going to store xenon, and then once I get to 4, I can turn those xenon in to the deck, and I can flip this guy over and say that contract is fulfilled. And I get those victory points at the end, and then you can see some of the contracts will also have money on them. So essentially, once you fulfill that contract, you would gain the money immediately during the game. Then you can see once I fulfill that contract, we get that next bubble on the side, so I can actually purchase another contract once I fulfilled that 1 contract there. Now, the other option you have for purchasing tends to be upgrades or some single-use cards, or, well, I would say not really single-use. Some of them are single-use, some of them can be played multiple times, but once they're in your hand. So here we have upgrades, and you actually start the game with a couple upgrades in your hand. So you can see here I have some base upgrades, which is my reflex upgrade, my feed upgrade. Now the way these upgrade cards work is that you can play them from your hand if you want as a one-time use thing. So I can play it from my hand and it tells you the phase that this will operate in. So like my reflex starter card operates in the distill card. This allows me to discard a card from my hand. So essentially from my hand, I could just discard one card into this discard deck. Now, this helps, so recognize that's not the distill action, it's a discard action. Recognize that that means that you can actually do that action before you take your distill action. So essentially, like if I had oxygen in my hand, I could actually discard that oxygen to distill this krypton, and then if I was left over with that xenon, I would have just the xenon, and I could store the xenon off to the side. Basically, anytime your hand has only xenon in it, ignoring upgrades, you just get to put that down into your storage bins off to that right side. So that's the idea with upgrades. The other thing you can do with these upgrades is they have a value on them, and that is for installing. So I can actually pay, if I had 8 money, I could actually pay to install this one. So this is my feed upgrade. Feed is cool because I can use it during the air phase, and I can introduce air twice. So I can actually get 2 air packets and 4 money on my turn when I add that air. So that allows me to add xenon into my system faster, but I'm also adding in more of those other elements that are clogging up my deck that I need to shed from the deck. I need to eliminate those. I need to refine the xenon, so it makes it a little bit harder, but you also get to accelerate your pacing with getting that xenon. Because the last thing you get to do on your turn is you can actually, so if you're holding on to cards at the end of your turn, let's say I have a krypton, nitrogen, and xenon left at the end of my turn, I can actually choose to hold on to any number of cards. So I'm going to hold on to my xenon, discard my other 2, and then I draw up to my 5 card hand limit. So this is a way that I can kind of hold on to that xenon. I can keep storing it, and then I can introduce some more cards in the system, and now you can see that I'm holding on to a lot of xenon, which is going to make it easier to kind of distill this out. So now I have to distill that nitrogen krypton. So I'm going to get less options my next turn, and I'm not working through my deck as fast, but holding onto that xenon can be a critical strategy to be able to kind of store that into those storage tanks there. Now, when purchasing from the market here, you have a couple options which are kind of cool. You can pay the lower price to add that to your discard pile. So like if I spent 1 money, I could add this directly to my discard pile. And then when it's in my hand, I can spend that 5 money to install it once I manage to draw this card. Now, you can also just pay the larger value in the bottom right to install that immediately, which is really cool. So you can just put that straight into your system from the market. The other card that I should mention here are these pipeline cards. There's going to be 3 different types of pipelines. There's an oxygen, nitrogen, and krypton pipeline. You can only get 1 of each type, and there's only, I think, 2 of each card in there, so at higher player counts, they can be very restrictive on those. But these ones are cool because if you pay the money, 5 to install, you are just going to install that into your console, and that's going to increase your hand size by 1 card. So now I have a 6 card hand limit instead of a 5 card hand limit. So that's really kind of the basics of the game here. It's a pretty standard fare deck builder, except for that whole deck management system with the shedding system of those cards. And I think those upgrade cards are super interesting too, because you're going to add those to your hand. You can use them as a single time use, or you can install them into your system as a permanent upgrade to your console, which is really cool. And the ordering of how you trigger these things is super interesting as well, for like that discard action or distill action. And then there's just some really crazy upgrades in this game. Like I have one out here right now. This is the reboiler condenser. So during the distill action, for each oxygen removed, you gain 1 money. So you might want to be adding more oxygen in your system to be able to distill that oxygen faster to get more cash during the game. Now, the game is going to continue playing until 1 of 2 conditions is met. We are going to essentially determine if players have, I believe it's going to be 5 upgrades. Yes, so 5 upgrades on one side or 5 contracts on one side. Once someone has achieved one of those victory conditions, they get to take this end game token, which they also get a choice for at this end game, which I really, really enjoy in this game. They can either take this end game token, they can take the 3 points and just be done, or they can flip this over and say, I'm going to take the final turn of the game. So if they think they can earn more than 3 points on that final turn, they might want to take this token and forfeit those 3 points so they can have 1 more action and go again. So that is going to do it for my quick overview. Oh, sorry, I got 2 more things to add for you before we move on to my review. I forgot to mention, so buy is kind of that main action. We also have the bid action here. So bid is you can actually take one of your bid tokens. You can place that on one of those cards. That will reduce the cost for you. So essentially this card costs 3, but if it has a bid token on it, it'll cost me 2 on the next round. The other thing is it kind of protects that card too, because that will increase the cost for other players and they have to pay me for each bid token on there, which is a neat little twist on there. So they would have to pay 3 plus 1 to me to buy this card now. So I protect it a little bit. Also during the wipe action, if there's a token on there, that card cannot be wiped from the market. So this is a way I can kind of protect contracts. And remember that contracts, those aren't going to cost anything to add to your tableau, but if you have a bid token on there, you're actually going to gain money for accepting that contract. It's like a little prepayment that you get, which is really cool. Now, there's just one more action that you can do in this game, and you can only do this every other turn. You can't do this back to back, but you can actually force your factory into overtime. And this is really cool because you can do the distill action 2 times in a row. So you can actually, if you had, let's say you had no nitrogen in your hand, but you had oxygen and krypton, but a bunch of xenon, you can actually distill all the oxygen in your hand. Then you could distill all the krypton in your hand. Then you'd be left with that xenon and you could store it. This is a really good way to just accelerate your way to get to that xenon, or maybe to fulfill that contract so you can do a purchase of a new contract right away. But essentially, if you are on the overtime side at the beginning of your turn, you have to actually flip that back over before your turn starts. So you can't do that back to back. Now you also get to do 2 bids. You don't get to add air to your system during this phase. And then you also must reshuffle your discard with your system deck here. And I think that's a really cool thing, because if you added some upgrades to your deck and you're like, oh, I want to get those back in, putting yourself into overtime is a way to kind of force your deck to refresh with all those new upgrades that you just purchased for yourself. That is going to be Xenon Profiteer. So the loop that you're working on is really just adding those air packets to your deck, trying to improve your distill action to try to distill out more of those elements and be left with just Xenon in your hand. So what do I think about this game? Xenon Profiteer, I have a way better time with this than I ever thought I would. So deck builders in general, I enjoy them. I'm not a crazy big Dominion fan. I enjoy Dominion. I find the loop, the cycle that it's going through to be good and engaging, but I feel like it's deck management. Your choice is really just what are you adding to your deck to change the probability of your deck? When do you start purchasing those victory point cards? I feel like once you draw your hand, you don't really have any choices on your turn. You just play them out and figure out how much money you have to purchase your next cards. Then you have to weigh the balance of, hey, do I take the risk of adding more cards in my deck, kind of diluting it, or do I go after those victory point cards, which will dilute it and not give me actions? So yeah, that deck building part is that is the core of the game, right? But once you draw those cards, it's like no choices, just lay them down and you're done. Now, Xenon Profiteer is still in the same genre. It is still a deck builder. And usually for deck builders, I just want a little bit more, like Tyrants of the Underdark. It takes Dominion and adds in this area control element, which I absolutely love. Clank takes the deck builder and adds in this positioning movement puzzle with the noise that you're generating and trying to collect these things. It adds in some decisions for you as you play those cards from your hand. And I would say that Xenon Profiteer doesn't do anything as, let's say, as engaging as something like Tyrants in the Underdark or Clank for me, but it does kind of lean into one of the things that I love about deck builders, and that is shedding cards from my deck or trashing cards. Like in Star Realms, I love going after those machine cards, those red cards that allow you to trash cards from your deck to try to whittle it down to just this lean machine that you get the cards that you want every single time. And Xenon Profiteer just says, hey, that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on making this the deck management aspect. You're going to add this air to your hand or to your deck, and then you're going to be trying to get rid of those trace element cards, or well, not trace elements. You're going to try to get rid of those main element cards to get down to that trace Xenon element. And the loop is just very engaging for me, just that constant going through your deck, drawing that hand, and then when you get those big moves, when you have like 3 Xenon in your hand and you're able to distill out and you're able to throw down those 3 Xenon for a contract that you have, like that, those moments are exciting to me in this game. The other parts I want to call out on this is I find the decisions on the upgrades to be fun. I think all the upgrades, they all seem kind of just crazy and broken to me. Like there's just some in here that's basically just going to be like distilled all the oxygen in your hand. There's going to be ones that allow you to place. So I got like the vapor compression refrigeration during the still action. For each nitrogen removed, you get to place a bid token. You can just kind of throw out all your bid tokens as you remove nitrogen from your hand during this game. There's going to be some that'll give you end game victory points. So it'll change your goal for the scoring condition. I really enjoy that too, because it's not just a straightforward, I need to go after these contracts. There can be some other objectives that you try to do as you unlock or install some of those upgrade cards that change your victory conditions a little bit. Maybe it increases the amount of points you're going to get from the leftover money you have. Maybe it increases the points you get for each installed upgrade that you have. So there's just some great variability with those upgrade cards, some really good decisions with installing those versus just adding to your deck. Do you use them one time, or do you spend all that money to install those to do a permanent upgrade to your system? And then there's also just a great system with these contract cards, because like I said, you're going to end the game once someone gets 5 contracts. So here I have some pretty high value contracts up here, but we can actually look through here and we have some 3 Xenon contracts. But if I go through here, like there's a 2 Xenon contract there. So you can see that someone could actually kind of rush the end of the game by going after these low value contracts. They could install this 2 Xenon one and then go after another like 3 Xenon one or something. And they could really rush those contracts and try to force that end game faster. And then you have to decide, is it worth going after that 5 Xenon if someone's rushing that end game? Do you have to change your strategy based on what they're doing? Because it is a race game. And I think that having this, and Dominion is still a race game, and I think that is an important aspect of it, because it drives you to make those critical decisions that are constantly pushing you towards those victory point conditions. And I think Xenon Profiteer uses that same kind of idea, but does it better for me. Like, I am more engaged in Xenon Profiteer. I would say there's less variability because Dominion has just so many expansions, but this one is very contained, very, very simple, very straightforward. You get the variety from this upgrade deck, but there are duplicates of the upgrade, so I'm not going to claim that this has as much variability or as much replayability as something like Dominion, but I just find the loop that it does more engaging for myself. So hopefully you can tell I really, really enjoy this game. I enjoy playing Xenon Profiteer. The only complaint that I have is really just around some fiddliness, because you got to build those air packets. So remember, every time you add air, you're going to add a nitrogen, an oxygen, a krypton, and a xenon. And this happens a lot in the game. So what I like to do is during like downtime between turns or something, like if it's not my turn, I will go through and I'm just going to be building these air packets out. I will build that one and we will just stagger a stack of cards over here. So that way when someone takes an air packet, they can just take one of these stacks and be ready to go. So this is kind of just happening between turns. And that reduces the fiddliness of this game, is just getting those air packets built during between rounds and the such. Now, the other downsides of this are, yeah, there's a decent amount of randomness in this. You know, like the upgrade cards, some upgrades will be incredibly helpful for somebody once they're flipped over, and it'll just be like, that's going to be, they take that upgrade and you're like, wow, I think you probably are going to end the game because that one is just way overpowered for the situation that we've found ourselves in. The other one is there are suits to the contract cards, and those suits are absolutely meaningless. I think it's kind of neat though. Like here we have a contract for the government, and that's the next ion drive that you're building, or the medical contract for UV sterilizers. So it does have some of those thematic elements with that, but the different industries are a different color, but in the base game, they're meaningless. Now, there is a mini expansion for this game that does make it more important on what contracts you collect. I've not tried that mini expansion. It doesn't have a whole lot of rules, but I would say this is not a game for me that hits the table a ton. It's just a fun one to pull out every now and again. So I'm usually teaching someone new, so I haven't actually added that expansion content in yet. Although I'm looking forward to giving it a shot. So overall with this game, I give this very high praise. Like I'm not going to say that this is like going to be the best deck builder ever. This is not the one I'm reaching for all the time. Like I think Clank is better. Tyrants in the Underdark is better. Then of course games like Dune Imperium Uprising is better. But if you're playing this at 2 players that with people that know it, this is just a nice light deck builder that you can knock out in 30, 40 minutes, I would say. Maybe 3 to 4 players. So even teaching new people, like I played this at 4, and even with the teach, it takes us about an hour, maybe an hour 15, which I think maybe that's a little long for this game, but once everyone knows it, I feel like turns go pretty fast. There's not a whole lot of analysis paralysis that I've run into in this game. Maybe the decision with which upgrade to get, that can be kind of the biggest sticking point in here, but overall, the actions are all very straightforward, so the game, it runs very smoothly. Like, it just flows. So yeah, Xenon Profiteer. I give it a just glowing remarks. I do recommend giving this one a try if you do like deck builders, but as I mentioned, this is not something that I'm gonna be like, go out of your way and like, yeah, this is not like a must play. This is a nice to have, enjoyable little 30-minute experience with that deck shedding mechanism. Now, I will mention this game is also a little harder to get because it's not really available on most retailers. I believe the only place I've seen it is going to be through Eagle Griffin's web store, but it is really cheap. Like, I think the base game is $15. You can pick up the expansion at the same time. The only downside is probably the shipping cost you're going to get, so maybe throw in another game if you want to try to minimize the impact of that shipping there. For Sale is another great one on the site, so you can't go wrong with that one. But yeah, I hope that hopefully you learned about this game. I feel like there's been some decent reviews out there, but I don't know if this game got enough attention. Maybe it's because of the name or the cover just doesn't sound exciting. The very last thing I want to call out is that this humor speaks to me, like this style of game. I'm an engineer, and Xenon Profiteer, I'm not super excited about it, but I understand the importance of Xenon. I work in semiconductors. We care about Xenon. We need Xenon for our processes. But I do enjoy this humor. So I'm just going to read you the first paragraph of the rulebook here, because it is the warning paragraph. It says, before using this product, carefully read this manual and retain it for future reference. Parents and guardians of children should read this manual and make sure that the child follows all safety precautions. This product has been designed with the highest concern for safety. However, any board game device, if used improperly, has the potential for causing fire, electrical shock, or personal injury. Use the Xenon Profiteer system in accordance with the instructions provided in the product documentation. Unauthorized modification of the rules herein will void your warranty. Refer servicing to qualified personnel only. So I love that the rule book kind of leans into this industrial engineering feel. There's even some extra little warnings in the back here, like we have. So I feel there's care and handling on the final page for this game, which I think is just brilliant inclusions into this weird little game. Okay, so that's going to do it for my review of Xenon Profiteer. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope maybe I got you interested in this game. And yeah, maybe you'll seek it out. So like I said, I don't like making strong recommendations for games because I feel like everyone has their own personal taste. I try to give you a good idea of how I feel about the game and a good idea of how the game plays, so you can have some inkling of if this is the type of game you would enjoy. And I do feel like if you want something kind of unique in that deck builder category, this fits that case for me. Like, I am pretty aggressive on shedding games, not as aggressive as some people, but I don't tend to hold on to games that I'm like, this is a 7. For me, Xenon Profiteer is probably 7 to an 8. It's in that category where I would usually get rid of this game if I've played it enough times. But every time I look at it, I'm like, that's just fun. It's unique. I don't want to get rid of this yet. I'm still holding on to Xenon Profiteer. So it's staying in my collection for a good amount of time. So let's close this out. I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate it always, and I will talk to you next time.